What separates the man who succeeds from the one who hesitates? It is not intelligence. It is not wealth. It is not even preparation. It is initiative. It is a willingness to act before he feels ready. The world does not reward those who wait for permission. It rewards those who seize the moment, while others are still waiting for signs. And yet, most people will spend the best years of their life waiting. They wait for more knowledge, more security, more confidence, more encouragement, more certainty. But what they fail to realize is that these things do not precede action. They follow it. Confidence is not a prerequisite to progress. It is a product of it. You do not feel ready before you begin. You begin, and then you grow into readiness. This is one of life's immutable laws. All power belongs to man who dares to move while others freeze. You see, the average man makes the mistake of thinking that success begins when everything aligns. But that man will die with his dreams intact and unfulfilled. The winners, those who build, who rise, who influence, do not wait for perfect conditions. They create conditions by taking imperfect action. They understand that the act of stepping forward activates the very forces needed to continue. They do not hope for clarity. They summon it by motion. When you act, you silence the noise. When you move, you override fear. When you begin, you rewire your identity. The only reason most men never become the person they were born to be is that they are unwilling to move until their emotions give them permission. But emotions are unreliable friends. They follow your patterns, your fears, your comfort zones. If you obey your feelings, you will become a slave to hesitation. But if you lead with decision, with discipline, with deliberate action, your feelings will begin to align with the man you are becoming. This is why I say winners act before they feel ready. They move because they are driven by purpose, not comfort. Purpose is a true compass. Purpose will carry you through fear, through resistance, through delay. Purpose will speak louder than your doubts, and it will lead you to decisions that your old self would have never dared to make. But make no mistake, every decision that advances your destiny will come wrapped in fear. The difference is not the absence of fear. The difference is in the response. Most people shrink. Winners rise. Most hesitate. Winners lean in. Most overthink. Winners execute. There is a moment, one that comes to all, where your life splits in two, the life you had if you waited and the life you stepped into because you moved. I do not care if you're unsure. I do not care if the path is dark. I do not care if the resources are missing. What matters is that you have a reason. What matters is that something inside you is calling for more. That is a seed. And the seed must be planted not in comfort, but in courage. Now let us speak plainly. The reason you keep delaying is not because you're not capable. It is because you've grown addicted to the idea of readiness. You think that if you just prepare enough, if you just gather a little more insight, a little more time, a little more reassurance, then you'll be ready. But that day never comes. And here's the truth. The man who waits to be certain will always be outpaced by the man who acts and learns. That is the advantage of the winner. He gathers feedback, not fantasies. He moves, adapts, iterates, refines. He doesn't sit still trying to predict the perfect moment. He trusts that the moment he chooses is the perfect one. Because he made it so, there's an illusion that has robbed millions of their destiny. It is the illusion of the perfect plan. But no plan survives contact with the real world. Winners do not rely on perfect plans. They rely on powerful momentum. They know that you can adjust what is moving, but you cannot steer what is standing still. You must be willing to learn through fire, to grow through action, to stretch through adversity. And that only happens when you engage with a mission before you feel worthy of it. I've met men with brilliance and vision who did nothing. I've met men with half their talent who did everything. And the difference was never their capability. It was their commitment to action. They had one quality the others lacked. They moved. They did not wait for applause or an invitation or the illusion of safety. They simply acted. And that action created results, relationships, revenue, resilience. You must understand this deeply. What you build in motion becomes a foundation for what you become in the future. Now I know what you're thinking. What if I fail? You will, and that is good. Failure is a forge. It refines your thinking, your skill, your standards. It eliminates what doesn't work and reveals what does. It humbles your pride and strengthens your character. But you will never experience that if you remain a theorist. Theorists do not change the world. Builders do, and builders act. You must become immune to embarrassment. You must become desensitized to the fear of not getting it right the first time. You must replace your fear of failure with a fear of regret, because regret, my friend, is the costliest thing a man can carry. It haunts him in the quiet moments. It whispers, "You could have, if only you had acted." But you don't have to live that way. You can choose to be the man who says, "I may not have had all the answers, but I acted. I trusted the voice within me more than the noise around me." Do you know what happens when you act before you feel ready? You become trustworthy in the eyes of your future. You prove that you are no longer a servant to delay. You prove that you can be counted on when there is no spotlight. That kind of man does not need to be reminded. He does not need to be begged. He is self-initiated, and that is the beginning of mastery. The world needs more men like this. Men who move before the applause, who start when it's still quiet, who build not because they have everything figured out, but because they're determined to figure out along the way. These are the men who rise to the top not by chance, not by luck, but by sheer force of decision. And you can be one of them if you dare let go of the false comfort of being ready. You are not supposed to feel ready. You are supposed to be available to grow, available to lead, available to move. And movement is what initiates the miracle. When you begin, the resources begin to appear. When you decide, the alignment begins to form. When you commit, the path opens up. Not all at once, but one step at a time. That is how greatness is built, step by step, not in a flash of inspiration, but in 1,000 quiet decisions that say, "I will go anyway. I will speak, build, begin, lead. Even if my voice shakes and my hands tremble, I will trust that growth will catch me on the way down. That confidence will meet me on the way forward. That readiness will rise as I do." This is how legends are made. Not by knowing more, not by waiting longer, but by choosing faster, by acting before they feel ready. When you move before you feel ready, you interrupt the cycle that keeps most men small. That cycle is built on the belief that success is a matter of ideal circumstances, of ideal timing, of ideal resources. But let me tell you plainly, nothing ideal ever arrives. The world is not interested in handing you the perfect moment. It is waiting for you to command the moment, and that command is issued the moment you act. Not when you know all the answers, not when your fears vanish, but when your decision outweighs your doubt. You must begin to think in a new way. If I feel unprepared, good. That means I'm on the edge of growth, because the edge is where winners are made. It is where old identities die and new ones are forged. The man who stays in the comfortable middle never discovers who he truly is. He survives, perhaps, but he never transcends. Winners live on the edge of their own ability, and they reach further not because they feel fully equipped, but because they know that readiness is cultivated in action. Understand this. You have to build the muscle of motion, and the only way to do that is by moving before the certainty appears. Certainty, like confidence, is created. It's not something you wait for. It's something you pull out of yourself through repetition, resilience, and relentless intent. But the man who waits to feel certain is forever stuck at the start line. His potential becomes a prison, locked behind the bars of indecision. I want to speak directly to the version of you that still thinks he's being wise by waiting. You tell yourself, "I need more clarity," or "I'm just not quite ready." Let me tell you something. Clarity does not come from sitting. It comes from stepping. It comes from engaging with the unknown. It comes from learning as you go, not from sitting as you analyze. There are lessons you will never discover until you walk into them. And those lessons are the very tools you need to succeed. The man who walks finds answers. The man who sits finds excuses. There's a reason so many brilliant men are stuck in mediocrity. It is not because they are underqualified. It's because they keep trying to perfect a path that can only be paved by motion. They build an image of success in their mind, but they never become a man in that vision because they're too afraid to meet the version of themselves that lives beyond hesitation. And here's the painful irony. The very act of waiting erodes your belief in yourself. Every time you delay, your inner confidence diminishes just a little more. But every time you move, even in fear, that confidence grows. It might feel like a whisper at first, but whispers repeated become roars. And those roars will one day drown out the doubt that used to paralyze you. Let me give you something practical. You don't have to take a massive leap. You just have to move. You just have to make the first call, write the first page, say yes to the opportunity. Take one step in the direction of your assignment. That one step sends a ripple through the entire system of your life. It signals to your mind that you are no longer just thinking. You are now becoming. When you begin, the resources align. When you show up, the right people show up. When you walk, the path becomes clear. Not all at once, but just enough for your next step. This is the truth. Your courage creates your clarity. You will not get it before. You get it through. It is not the polished man who wins. It is the man who endures the polishing process. And that process only begins when you act. Stop waiting for life to get easier. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for the fear to subside. Instead, become the man who responds not to feelings, but to principle. Not to comfort, but to calling. There's a man inside you who's been watching and waiting. He knows who you're capable of becoming. He knows the strength that's hidden under hesitation. He knows the vision that you've been carrying, even if you've never said it out loud. And he is waiting for you to take the first step. That version of you doesn't care what other people think. He doesn't measure self-worth based on applause. He doesn't delay action because of fear. He decides, he commits, he acts. That version of you is not fiction. He is waiting for your permission to emerge. And the only thing that unlocks him is action taken before readiness is felt. That's the threshold you must now cross. Not someday, not when it's easier. Now, there is no greatness without risk. There is no transformation without discomfort. There is no legacy without motion. So take the risk, bear the discomfort, initiate the motion, and know this: when you do, something in you will awaken. You will walk differently, think differently, speak differently, because you are no longer trying to feel like a winner. You are becoming one. And becoming is not a feeling. It is a discipline, a mindset, a pattern of behavior that is repeated so consistently it becomes your new identity. Once you shift from a man who waits to the man who moves, you'll find something else. People will start responding differently, not because you sought their validation, but because motion is magnetic, commitment is contagious, clarity attracts clarity, and your boldness gives others permission to step out of their own hesitation. You're not just building for yourself. You are becoming a model for what is possible, a living example of what it looks like to stop waiting and start walking. That is the power of action. It multiplies. It spills into every area of your life. Your relationships, your influence, your income, your confidence. One decision made in faith creates 1,000 ripple effects. But that ripple only begins when you take the first step. So if you've been waiting, consider this your interruption. Consider this your moment. Consider this your turning point. The gap between who you are and who you could be is not closed by time. It is closed by action. Action taken now. Not tomorrow, not when you're ready, but now. This is how winners rise. Not because they knew it all, not because they had certainty, but because they had the courage to begin. If you're still with me, then you've already begun to shift. You've already begun to challenge the old idea that action must wait until conditions are perfect. You've already started to believe at some level that maybe readiness is not something you wait for, it's something you create. And if that thought has taken root, even just a little, then you are now more powerful than most. Because most people never get to that realization. They spend their entire lives trying to avoid uncertainty, never realizing that uncertainty is the very field where transformation grows. Let me give you a truth that has stood the test of time. The greatest success stories were built in the soil of discomfort. No one ever built a legacy from a place of comfort. No one ever created change, launched movements, built companies, shifted cultures, or left impact behind from a position of absolute certainty. What they had was conviction. And conviction doesn't need comfort. It doesn't even need clarity. It needs decision. A moment when you say, I will no longer sit in the shadows of my own potential. I will no longer play the role of the hesitant man while the world waits for my gifts to be activated. You have something inside you, something powerful, a set of gifts, ideas, principles, insights, and strength that the world is yet to fully experience. And if you continue waiting, not only do you rob yourself of the life you could have lived, you rob the world of the contribution you were born to make. Let that land. You're not just waiting to feel ready. You're withholding your gift. And the world cannot afford for you to keep sitting still. Because your voice, your vision, your value, it matters. But it only matters if you give it motion. There is something sacred about a man who acts when the fear is loud, when the path is unclear, when the support is scarce. Because that kind of man doesn't move for applause. He moves for alignment. He doesn't show up to impress. He shows up to impact. And he doesn't make decisions based on comfort. He makes decisions based on character. That man is the winner. Not because he never fails. Not because he never doubts. But because he keeps moving anyway. There's a myth that says you need to have everything together before you start. You don't. What you need is a reason. And once your reason becomes strong enough, your movement will match it. The problem is not that people lack time or knowledge or ability. It's that they lack fire. They've let the spark die while they waited for perfect conditions. But winners keep the spark alive by moving. Even when it's small, even when it's messy, even when no one sees it. Because the fire you feed grows and the fire you neglect dies. It's that simple. So if your passion feels low, act. If your belief feels shaky, act. If your purpose feels buried, act. Not because you feel ready, but because action builds readiness. Action builds belief. Action awakens your internal leadership. And action develops the one thing that separates amateurs from achievers. Identity. Identity is not declared. It's demonstrated. It's built in the gym when no one's watching. It's built in the late nights, the early mornings, the lonely seasons when you keep going even though you could walk away. Every time you act, you cast a vote for the man you want to become. Every time you hesitate, you cast a vote for the man you used to be. Which one are you voting for today? The world is full of good intentions, but only a few live with executional integrity. That means they do what they said they'd do. They follow through. They build, they finish, they show up, even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient, even when no one is clapping. That is what makes someone unstoppable. Not hype, not noise, not perfection, but consistent, aligned, courageous action done before the feeling of readiness ever arrives. Winners don't wait to feel like leaders. They lead and become leaders. They don't wait to feel confident. They take action and become confident. They don't wait until all the questions are answered. They move with the ones they do have, and they trust that the rest will be revealed along the way. Let me leave you with a thought. 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, who do you want to be? What do you want to have built? What do you want to look back on and say, I'm proud of that? Because whatever the answer is, I guarantee you this, it will not come through waiting. It will not come through more research, more study, more safe thinking. It will only come through bold execution. And the irony, when you look back on the things you feared, you'll laugh. You'll realize they were never as big as they seemed. You'll realize that fear was only loud because you were listening. But once you acted, once you walked, once you decided, the fear lost its grip and you gained something it could never give you, ownership of your destiny. You don't need someone to anoint you. You don't need another sign. You don't need a bigger audience or a clearer strategy or more motivation. What you need is a single decision that from this moment forward, you will be the man who acts before he feels ready. Because readiness isn't feeling. It's a reputation. It's a reputation you build with yourself every time you do what you said you'd do. And when that reputation becomes rock solid, when your word means something to you, when your actions align with your purpose, there's no force on earth that can stop you. This is the way. Decide with conviction, move with intention, act without apology, and become the kind of man who doesn't wait for the world to crown him because he already knows who he is, and he's too busy building to look around for validation. Winners act before they feel ready. That's why they win.